Since strong governance frameworks are the bedrock of a resilient society that ensures government institutions remain transparent, efficient, and accountable to the people they serve, ensuring that capacity gaps in government agencies in Nigeria are properly managed goes a long way in fixing the loopholes in government agencies. However, according to some critics, the private sector has become more efficient in terms of entrenching corporate governance than the public corporations. They insist that the gap of human resources in government agencies in Nigeria is a huge problem that must be fixed amid effective budget implementation. Joining us now on the show is Professor Okey Ikechukwu, a professor of strategic management and human capital development and the executive director, Development Specs Academy. Good morning, Professor, and welcome to the morning show.
Okay. Good morning. Glad to be here.
Good morning.
Yeah, Ruben.
Compliments of the season.
Good morning. You can see I'm not wearing, I wish you the same, and I'm not wearing the cap you like.
Yeah, I was looking at it.
Unless it's Christmas, I want to put you on notice. No way.
How are you?
Rufai, good to see you too.
Good to see you, sir. Merry Christmas
I'm
and
good.
a prosperous New Year, sir.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
This
Wish you the same.
about capacity gap in our public agencies linked to issues of corporate governance. Now, recently, there's some story I stumbled upon saying that, for example, in some government agencies, that some people are scheduled to proceed on pre-retirement vacation, but that they've been given an extension to stay on because of this same capacity gap, to stay, for a year. And the president, is his prerogative. He can extend, I imagine, under the purview of his executive powers within the Constitution. But there's been some complaint, and government cannot just allow an institution to collapse. If you could help us start with that before we talk about corporate governance and capacity building within the system.
Well, in the matter of capacity gaps, it is for the agency to identify the gaps, design a template for its containment, and choose appropriate personnel, provided it's acting objectively and in the interests of the agency organization concerned. I think you must be talking about the one in the customs, and I think it's an appropriate example to take to contextualize a lot of things. I'm sure you are aware, Ruben, that between 1992 and 2009, there was embargo on employment in that agency. In other words, if two of us had been working there for the 17 years intervening, no new persons were employed. That means that either promotions were affected, or even if we are promoted, we'll be forced to be performing overlapping functions. Now, when finally it was lifted up, of course, a lot of people were in very high positions with nobody under them. So, in fact, thank you. Picture our being on the editorial board at that time in 1993, and the Guardian had embargoed employment. Who would have been the ones doing the job of the secretary, probably part of the typesetting, etc.? No, so migrating back to the issue on the table, by 2003, that agency, NCS, Nigerian Customs Service, had 60% of its senior personnel exiting on retirement, legitimate retirement. Next year, to 2023, another 23% left. Just picture that. And in fact, between now and the end of right now, within this year, in the next couple of weeks, there will be a 76% movement of senior personnel. And next year, another 40% will retire. So that presents really a catastrophic image. And only an intelligent leadership will quickly look around and decide what to do. So if you have this mind of exit, then it's for you to restructure. When you speak of rules for engagement, among other things, the primary consideration is the sustainable existence of an organization. So if you have this kind of attrition and exit, and you discover that by some adjustment, it can be better managed for knowledge transfer, for skill transfer, that would be the way to go. The man there, for how long has he been around? He grew through the system, and that's the most unlikely person to want to deliberately sabotage it. Assuming those guys were being renewed for maybe 2 years or 4 years, I will join in the outcry. I have no interest in these retention things. But it's for 12 months. And if you look at some of the initiatives that come in place in this agency, look at the, what do you call it, clearing. If you look at all of that, my thinking would be that given the shortness of time, it would be good to sweep everybody away if you have the right lieutenants to drive the new reforms. If you haven't, a minor extension, which will not undermine the career of others, would be ideal, would be advisable. And I think that's probably the path they've taken. As for people being angry, people will always be angry. The question is justified anger, contextualized anger, institutional integrity, sustainable institutional management, etc. Those are some of the things to consider, and it's not about customs. There are several other organizations, including private sector organizations, which some of us have been part of, where some people were to be laid off. Where I was GM, I called a management meeting. I said, yes, it's time for this guy to go. But look at the structures on the table. Look at the new distribution methods we've gotten. If you can assure me that within this period, all of this will be in place, I didn't even finish the sentence, we agreed. Call the guys who were hopping about, even lobbying to take the position, to explain the thing to them. One-on-one, do you see the challenges? Please assist this guy. He will be around for 6 more months. Let's see who among you will really show proper management of that template. So I can understand the official argument, the media complaint, and all of that. But let's look at it. Yes, you mentioned customs. 6 people are being retained, and 6 of them are from the 6 geopolitical zones. And that brings us the issue of fact. What I read in the paper in the case of customs, unlike another organization, was that, 12 people were being extended, but the actual number is 6, among so many other things. So gaps must be addressed in order to sustain institutions, not in order to sustain rules. And assuming there's arbitrariness, that somebody did this without consultation and the president didn't approve, and there's also people from one part of the country only, I will be the first to say this cannot hold. And I'm glad the direction in which you're moving the conversation, because it's going to lead us to wider discussions about capacity issues in governance, in government, in the public sector, and the private sector. So that's my initial intake, at least with specific reference to the organization you mentioned.
Okay.
No, the actions taken by the leadership of that organization.
I get your point about,
Yes,
leadership,
please.
about sustaining an institution. But some of the people who are complaining in the specific case that I brought up, they are saying that the president doesn't have the powers to grant the extension by 1 year. Did the president act beyond his powers?
That's according to the service rules. Am I correct?
Yes.
Yes. It was in that report, actually.
Yes.
I will tell you, I read it also. I read it with some, if you like, some amusement. There's what we call pragmatic existential reality. I was teaching in Unilag, just like you were teaching in UI at some point. So at the time I resigned to leave for the Guardian editorial board, which you were already in 1 year ahead of me, there was an issue of courses that needed to be taught. So I had resigned, but I was available to teach without pay. And the argument was, how can you allow somebody to teach in this institution? He's not on the payroll, among other things. The dean, Professor Akere, Nuruddin, the VC, they looked at it and said, well, but the point I'm making being that actually happened, and I thought for an extra 3 years without pay, not as you see from the record. So the president's, any rule is fixed in order to make an organization work. Any law is made in order to make societies succeed. When you have an asymmetrical situation, it means that there must be a review of the rules without obvious indication of arbitrariness. I believe that the primary responsibility of any president is national interest, sustainable social cohesion, institutional longevity, among other things. Now, these are the considerations that could lead to alternate exercise of executive capacity in overriding national interest. Now, the question perhaps that might be raised is, okay, how is it in the national interest? And that's a matter for the customs or any other agency concerned to present. But when we harp on rules, knowing that rules can be changed, knowing that no rule is eternal, knowing that we've seen all kinds of things, and we've seen all kinds of things all over the world, and it's not today, it's part of history, extreme emphasis on that can easily make you lose the argument. If you just say, the rule is there, it can be changed, it was made at a particular date, had been altered over the years. If you recall, the service-wide rules is not what it used to be. the rule made before the exit of the military saying that any SA coming will be deemed a deputy director. That was because the civil servants, PAMSEC, has suffered severely from the, if you like, overbearing tyranny of the military assistants of those they worked with, either as ministers. So rules will always change. It's for this current development to be presented and explained in such a way that it's intended to advance institutional capacity and effectiveness, and also the overriding consideration of the president that to show that this is in the national interest and that it does not significantly undermine the projection, progression, and tenure, or if you like, professional satisfaction of those who might be affected. Now, if I'm among those expecting to move up, I won't be happy about it. Okay. But there could be a context to it that will be such that even if I'm not happy, I'll say, well, I can understand why this is happening. Oh, but I wish it wasn't happening. Okay. All of that I can relate to. We're all human.
All right. Thank you so much, Prof. Now, when we look at government institutions, a number of issues that plague those institutions and, of course, affect efficiency. And we've used words like transparency, efficiency, accountability. You don't associate them very often with government institutions. This leads to underproductivity or lack of productivity in its entirety. How do we solve this problem? Because it seems as if different administrations come in, different policies, different leaders come in, and with this aim or this drive to change the way government institutions are run, but that issue of transparency and accountability is still an issue, right from the recruitment process, the way that their books are open or not open. How do we solve this problem?
It's a big problem, and I'll take you back to 2004. At that time, I was special assistant to the Minister of Information and National Orientation, Ikechukwu. Brilliant fellow, very dedicated, very hardworking. Now, he reasoned that Minister of Information requires professional information officers so that it should be heavy on professionals. So he sought special clearance from President Obasanjo, and he, I think, was the only minister authorized to assess and determine whether to accept any person posted by the Civil Service Commission to the ministry. So after that exchange and endorsement and clearance, the first list of names that came, it was 25 names from the Civil Service Commission. They all had exactly the same letters. Some of them were cleared, but in the process of clearance, we found out that 5 of those letters did not originate from the Civil Service Commission. In other words, there's a cartel or cabal or whatever you choose to call it, that, at least in our judgment at that time, were smuggling people into the service successfully. So that's one. When that happens, you have an issue on your table. Also, you notice that the emphasis of anti-corruption agencies and all of that is very often on, if you like, capital projects. Does anybody pay enough attention to recurrent? When a ministry says it's going to spend 200 million on diesel in a year and that ministry doesn't have a functioning generator, who verifies that? So those are some of the things. And still going back to that experience, there was a time we decided to carry out a census. What do you call it? Staff census. And you know the ministry has personnel all over the country in every local government. We had a staff list of nearly 5,000 people. So we created 6 teams and went around. We could not confirm the existence of over 300 people. They were not on the list. Among the things we confirmed, we saw those who should have retired, who should not have been promoted between level 6, who were now on 12. All the documents secured from that tour and everything were stored in a secure place in the ministry, but somehow all of it managed to disappear without anybody having an explanation for it, including security. So we have a fundamentally distorted system that has a life of its own. And that's why when you speak of fighting corruption or looking for transparency, there are key issues to consider. In every ministry, there is a transparency monitoring unit or whatever new name. There's a procurement unit, there's a director of finance and account, there's Servicom office. These are the people to be queried when there's corruption. But that's a matter for another day. So going back to the substantive matter you raised, the question of accountability and among other things must not just be located in the fact of asking people to be good. What is the pay packet of the average civil servant? What's the pay packet of the average person working in an anti-corruption agency? And what's the financial profile of those who are causing havoc in the country? They can always undermine the system. Okay. And also, because the private sector is not as viable as it ought to be, you find that people look for government employment. You come into an office in the ministry where there should be 4 people. That office is occupied by 16 people, and they plan who will come on Monday or Tuesday. That in itself is corruption. That in itself is the nurturing of a disposition to collect money without earning it. The challenge is comprehensive. It's not about preaching to the people. It's a leadership framework that can make it different. And I've seen that happen with some of the ministers I worked in the past and in some places where I held responsibility. So it's real, it's endemic, it's very strong. And it's facilitated by everyone who is complaining about corruption. That's why if you're made a minister today, it's your friends, your family members, your extended family members of your church or mosque that will come and say it's our turn. That will come and make, within 3 days of your being minister, can you give me 50 million? If you give him, he won't ask you where it's coming from. Your traditional ruler will give you a title and say, our son, this is our illustrious son. Okay. He's illustrious in robbery. That's the only thing not added in the sentence. Everybody knows you were poor. 18 months into government position, you build a 700 million naira mansion, you have 19 cars, etc. Nobody talks. So you find that subliminally, the notion of corruption, unentitled income, false reputations has become part of our national psyche. Leadership can make a difference. You can't expect the followership. You set a template, those who misfire, you take them on, the number of those who will misfire will keep increasing. Okay. So it's real.
Very, very great point made. I want you to talk me through the role of also institutional memory, which I think is largely missing in all of these things. And the good old days where we used to have...
Sorry, can you start again? I missed the opening of your comments.
The role of institutional memory, which is largely missing in this trajectory.
Yes.
Secondly, how can we go back to the good old days where we had the super palm sex, the AIDAs of this world? Also, I want us to talk about, integrity in the system. There was a very scathing article written in the Vanguard of why things cannot pretty much work with INEC as an institution. And that article, with the points they were stating, talked about the fact that people that have shown any level of integrity are systematically eased out of the system of INEC. And it was a very shocking article. I think for further reading, you could check out the Vanguard. It was written about 2 days ago. And why our electoral system
what was the title?
Has not worked, And the truth has to be said. It's replica of what happens in every government.
Sorry, Rufai. One moment.
Yes, sir.
If you will let me take because these your questions, none must be missed. They are very fundamental.
Okay.
The first tranche of the issue you raised, yes, let me take it.
Institutional memory, and how can we get the days
institutional memory?
The super PAMSEC back like days of AIDA.
Okay, I will take the second leg. We cannot get back to the days of the super PAMSECs. Those days are gone. They did very well. They were part of national memory, national leadership. We must not also forget that they were the major facilitators of some of the mischief of the military. They were in a position to advise them on what kind of laws to make, on what kind of rules that cannot violate anything. And you don't, with all due respect, you don't have enough people to manifest that stature of super PAMSECs. The other element is the question of institutional memory. In other words, having in an organization those for whom and through whom what that organization represents can be seen. Once you look at the statutes and you check the history, you see that it is consistent. That has become a problem because of the growing inclination for, outsourcing. And I'll cite an example. Ministry of Information 2003 or 2004, there was a national event, National Council on Information. Of course, during that, you also make exhibition, very elaborate exhibition of the pictorial history of the Federal Republic of Nigeria. And between some people in the ministry and some retired officers of more than 10 years in retirement, custodianship or custody of all the pictures needed for the exhibition was with one former retired director. He will then be hired as a consultant. He will bring Nigeria's material to exhibit for a fee and carry away again. All of that. Now, that's the kind of conspiracy you cannot manage. So you find that institutional memory is being migrated out of those places. That's number one. Number two, we also have too many splittings of ministries. And with that, the balkanization of available information makes each new ministry to be ill-equipped, make the old one not to have enough information. Is it irremediable? The answer is no. What do? if you're going on a tour, don't just carry your special assistant and your PA and your cameraman, who quite frankly have less than 5% value on the trip. Take somebody from research and the statistics department, take somebody from the media office who will give you a report, independent reports. That's part of what you take up in the next management meeting. It gets entered as a record of what transpired in the life of the minister while you are there in a management meeting. That's how institutional memory is built. Many people will talk about institutional memory, and when you're going on a foreign trip, they give you 34 names. It's for institutional memory. The memory will crash. So that's not the kind. I thought I should separate that. So you can take on the next point.
Okay. So what I was saying was around how we selectively destroy people that have integrity in the system. And the article I was referring to is a Guardian news, is a Vanguard, newspaper article written on the 19th of December, saying presidential elections between Ghana and Nigeria, 7 reasons beavers may never work in Nigeria, an investigation by Jide Ajani. It's one that everybody should read. And it talks about the fact that how we selectively sieve out those that have integrity in the system. What would you have to say about that? Because it's a pervasive trend in our system.
One, I know Jide. 2, I'm sure you're aware of written similar articles. 3, I agree completely with the submission of the writer. And the reasons are simple. If you and I are imams, and we're thinking of instituting Islamic values, and we're asking people to read the hadith, we're telling them to perform zakat, we're telling them to pray 5 times a day, we will not invite an armed robber to join us because he doesn't believe in what we're doing. So if those who have taken violent possession of the state are serving their interests in the name of public policy and public interest, what you'll find is that they cannot allow to be recruited anybody who will be setting what I'll call a bad example. You've set up school feeding. Your reason for setting it up is for money to be, for the children to come to school, the food will lure them, they stay long enough to learn. But some of us plan to confiscate that money where you've budgeted 2,000 per child. We want to take 1,007 and give 300. And so we now find somebody who is very excited about doing the original intention. We'll cut him off. What I see is a Nigerian state that has progressively moved onto the ranks of, if you like, political and leadership highwaymen who have hijacked offices but have not taken responsibility along with it, who therefore cannot tolerate the presence, involvement, and, offensive presence, engagement of somebody who actually takes leadership seriously. Rufai, that's what I see on the table. So if my reason for going to the National Assembly is in order to make sure that in 4 years' time I have about 19 billion, I know why I'm going there. You're the one on the side telling me that is to make laws. So if many of the people there, many of the people who are governors are like me, we have a project, we have a shared ambition, we'll drive it, we'll exclude those who are not like us. Well, that's why going back to the past, imagine anybody in the...
Well, if you could just complete that sentence. Because
Ruben, this is ambush.
Well, we seem to be running out of time. But if you could just quickly wrap up your thoughts on that subject. Go ahead.
Oh, okay, very simple. Leadership has a key role to play. In all of this, we have a nation to defend. We have to ensure that the right things are done. And those who are not being encouraged by the system because it's quote-unquote rotten should please not give up.
Well, we'd like to thank you very much, Professor Okey Ikechukwu, for joining us on the morning show. Thank you indeed.